When I started working in missions around the year 2000, we had one primary model of financing the work we were doing. And that consisted largely of gifts and contributions from churches and Christians in the congregations of the churches we were working with, family and friends, and people who were basically sympathetic with the Great Commission, understood why it was necessary to do it, and they were supportive of the work that we were doing. So in a sense, most of the funding came from the Christian public. But by the time I was leaving missions 20 years later, we had developed two other revenue streams that were taking shape in a pretty big way. The first one was developing a capacity to tap into institutional funding. So by institutional funding, I mean money from large organizations, from government development agencies, people who generally work in the space of development. And what used to happen is that these organizations were willing to look the other way and ignore the churchy kind of things that we were involved in, and were looking basically at the outcomes that were social in nature. So as we were working in different communities, there were several development results that were being witnessed. And so they were willing to partner with us in funding those outcomes while ignoring the overtly Christian things that we were doing. But for purposes of this conversation, I think one of the touch points was also developing the capacity to package the expertise that we had developed within the organization over a number of years and put that out to market and sell our services, so to speak. And this was the entrepreneur side of things that we were looking at as a way of developing a vibrant revenue stream. So a lot of this happened in the way of consultancies, but because I was involved in the initial discussions on both these new revenue streams, I was able to see especially how having that entrepreneur mindset was proved useful in being able to expand the possibilities of the things that we were involved in by bringing in way more money than we were able to bring before. So that was the first touch point that I had that really exposed me and made me start thinking about entrepreneurship. The second one happened pretty early in my career. So I was working as a project funding officer for our office in Africa. And what used to happen every year is that we would bring together all the projects and formulate a budget, an annual budget that we would then present to our donors for consideration. And it just happened that my boss at the time, his name was Dr. John Holman. He would pray almost every time we were going through this process. And his prayer went something like this. God, I thank you for the people that you have equipped with the ability to create wealth. Now, I got curious to know who these people are and how they always stayed motivated to use what God had brought their way as income and revenue and wealth, whatever you call it, and were willing to support the work that we were doing year after year after year. So through the process, I was able to meet with some of them, and I was always eager to sit down with them and pick their mind and know what motivated them. Many of these funders, families and just individuals, tended to be entrepreneurs. And so as I got to interact with them more and more, God used that to stir something within my heart. And long story short, after serving for 20 years in frontline ministry, I found myself in the space of entrepreneurship. And that's what I'm doing right now, working with my wife and with my family, running a couple of businesses. And just like I saw in the funders and in the donors that I was interacting with, we also are motivated to do what we do because we want to support the kingdom of God and the expansion of the same. And so there's a lot that I have learned through that process. So I can say that the many years that I spent working in missions, God used that to prepare me for the world of entrepreneurship. And I continue to rely on His word to guide me and to guide us in how we go about running our businesses and working with people in that space. So don't take the time that you're in for granted. God may be using it to prepare you for something that He has in store for you in years to come.